On to mainstream cinemas post-1992, I see the demolition of Babri Masjid as a very important moment in the history of our cinemas, particularly in the history of Bombay cinema, because it's as if until then, mainstream cinemas did not want to deal with Hindu-Muslim relations. It was too difficult, too traumatic, and hence sort of kept away. And the way in which they responded to Muslims was usually to have the good Muslim, the good nationalist Muslim represented on screen. But with the Babri Masjid, demolition of Babri Masjid, it was as if the communal cauldron that had been simmering, suddenly the covers had blown, and now mainstream cinemas had sort of began to respond directly to the implications. What did that demolition and the Ram Janmabhoomi movement mean for us as a nation, us as a society, as a community? So the demolition of the Babri Masjid, the film Mani Ratnam's 1995 film Bombay, has a very poignant evocation of the demolition. The censors had actually removed the video clips, so Ratnam actually uses photographs and a very heart-rending cry on the soundtrack to evoke that particular moment, the emotion of that moment. Also, what happens at this time, and this is very important, Partition, the event of Partition, was that now mobilized by Hindutva political formations for a consolidation of a majoritarian identity discourse. So Partition becomes this traumatic moment in Hindu history for which Muslims have to pay a price today. So in every communal riot that happens, it's as if the Muslims have to pay the price of partition. Very peculiarly, there is a shift that has taken place. At the same time, community identities are explosive. Partition returns as a theme now. So in 1998, 2003, in a film in Pinjar, for instance, why should in 2003, why should there be a film about the partition? And Pinjar is about the partition. It doesn't talk about the contemporary, it talks about that moment, right? So that there is an allegorical evocation, evoking the partition as actually a form through which we need to look at contemporary communalism. And Pinjar, like Mamo, is a very interesting film because here, once again, it is the woman, the protagonist, the female protagonist, who defines what home is. Because at the end of the film, she refuses to go back to her own home, supposedly in India now, and she stays back in Pakistan with the man who had initially raped her, but then marries her. Also in the context of Pinjar, let me remind you about Shaheed-e-Mohabbat Boota Singh, a very poignant Punjabi film which has a storyline that a lot of us are familiar with the Sikh husband of Zainab, the Muslim woman who is recovered by the state and who doesn't want to go back home and wants to stay on here. The other film that I really want to talk about, and I don't know if there's time to show a clip, is a very important film made by Kamal Haasan, Hey Ram, in 2000. Now, Hey Ram is interesting for me because it begins with the partition and comes down, connects to the contemporary, because it begins on the 7th anniversary of the demolition of Babri Masjid. And then there's a flashback about the partition. It's also very interesting because for two reasons. One, so the lead actors who are important for us is, of course, Kamal Haasan himself, who plays the Hindu, very secular initially, but then becomes a fundamentalist, a Hindu fundamentalist, and Shah Rukh Khan, who plays Amjad Khan in the film, his friend. And this friendship is not only is this friendship at stake, but it's also a friendship that finally, with the death of Amjad Khan, that Shah Rukh, brings Saket Ram back on course, as it were. The other reason why this film is important is because it is actually about the plot, the Hindutva plot to assassinate Gandhi. And Saket Ram, the central character, is like Godse, but he's not Godse. And the reason why it's also very important to understand why he's not Godse is because Godse's story, we know the end of Godse's story. This is a Godse-like figure who becomes like Godse, but then realizes at a very critical moment in the film what he has done and abjures that kind of fundamentalist ideology. So he then actually takes upon himself the burden of the majority community, guilt of violence towards the minority. So it's very interesting. It's also very important that the film is about the first time, I think, in our history that in Indian cinema, a film says very clearly that Godse, a right-wing fanatic, killed, assassinated Gandhi. And I think we should not forget that. That is important to remember today, and it's important to reiterate. So it says that, and it also makes a bid for the loss of Gandhiism. Gandhi is assassinated, but we seem to have also forgotten what he represented. So it's an important film for me. The other films, Zakhm and Fiza. Zakhm is also a film about Bombay, the Bombay riots. That's by Mahesh Bhatt in 1998. Fiza in 2000 by Khalid Mohammad. And about the Bombay riots in the wake of the demolition of Babri Masjid. A film that's important because, like Salim, this is a film which demonstrates clearly the manner in which the Muslim is stereotyped and othered. The whole process of othering and pushing the Muslim youth towards a dead end. So Hrithik Roshan's character, Man, who's a young Muslim boy who gets caught in the riot, he seems to have no other avenue at that particular moment, but is pushed towards terrorism, and at the end of the film, you see him backed up against a dead end with no escape sort of possible.
Hiram I have a different view on Hiram. I don't think it failed because of the political content or because of visiting this wound of history. I think there was also certain narrative issues and stuff like that. Okay.
Yeah, that's a different conversation we have.
Distance that right now. Okay. But you're saying that certain secular discussion was used and things have not been resolved, things have been repressed. But isn't that where actually popular culture comes in? I mean, cinema, in a particularly narrative cinema, is meant to be, also serves as a catalyst to cause that catharsis. It becomes an agent of resolution, actually. And we never really use that. I mean, in that sense, I mean, the guilt of the Holocaust, which was sort of a slightly larger event in terms of human cost, and the kind of hatred which was unleashed over so many years which took place, it doesn't get resolved so easily. I mean, even now people are working through it, I'm sure. You know, also the guilt of the collusion that neighbors did, ordinary people did, which was the most scary part. But they still aired it. I mean, it got detoxified in some sense. I mean, it was held to the sunlight. Whereas on the one hand, you're saying that they feared for the prophets and, you know...
No, I'm just saying, if you want to be cynical...
Quite likely, No, absolutely, it could have been. And yet, I still wonder, what is it that they feared? What do you think would happen? Except the fact that, is that what they feared, that they won't run, those films won't run, because it would be touching upon the pain of people? But you look at today, we are also pretty polarized. And yet, Anubhav Sinha goes out and makes a film called Mulk, which doesn't do very well, but it does much better than expected, and it actually addresses the issue of communal prejudice. He takes up Article 15, which does well. I mean, the others that you're referring, like Mukkabad, etc., may not have necessarily done well. Article 15 does tremendously well. It directly addresses the issue of caste. So it's possible for us to tell stories which work these issues in.
Absolutely, and I think that's what I mean when I say that it actually is very important for filmmakers to take on these issues.
So hence my question directly to you, Ira, once again. Why do you believe that this is not happening? Why has it not happened? Political fear, today I can understand, yes, and there is actually. I know I'm from the film industry. There is self-censorship which takes place. Producers don't want you to take up these issues. But this is now when there is a palpable, actual, concrete fear. What about earlier?
I mean, I think the films that I'm discussing, and especially the New Wave was different, because New Wave is art cinema. The audience, they are not mainstream releases, etc. And as a movement, it had a political drive, and it was addressing these. But as far as mainstream cinemas, I think after 1961, after Dharamputra, actually caste disappears from mainstream cinemas. and communalism is not addressed at all the way up to art cinema. So obviously the cinema...
Only class.
Only class.
The rich and poor.
Yeah, only class. Because through class, and the romantic stories, through which these resolutions can. And they also suit the melodramatic format, right? So, through which these issues. But both caste and communalism, which are difficult issues, were not. And how was the Muslim represented? We talk about the representation of Muslims. Khan Chacha, the good Muslim.
Right,
Rahim. I think in Zanjeer it's Sher Khan and so on.
Right, that is Diwar.
Yeah, Diwar, yeah. So, Sholay, I think.
Sholay Imam Sahib.
Imam. So, there you go. So, the good Muslim, the figure of the good Muslim, right? But Zakham, it's post 1992. A film like Zakham, where the hysteria around, the mixing of Hindu and Muslim. I remember first looking, when I first saw Zakham, and it was so loud and so hysterical, and, you kind of say, oh my God. And then I began to think about it, and really there is this hysteria. How do you actually deal with this hysteria in a popular form? I don't think...
Interestingly, in Zakham he uses that same narrative element of Dhanputra.
Yes.
That the second son doesn't know that the mother is a Muslim.
Yes, yes.